Good morning everyone and welcome back to another review of the Hearthstone adventure League of Explorers. My name is Rooster and today we're going to take a look at the third wing called the Ruined City. Is this expansion worth it for you? That's what we're going to take a look at. But first, let's check out what this adventure will offer you. This is the third wing of the League of Explorers adventure. That means you'll have to purchase the first two wings before accessing this one. It is for sale for 700 gold, or you can of course buy it for money, but you'll be better off buying all of the wings at once. I've talked about that in my general overview of this adventure, so you might want to check that out first. So what is this third wing, the Ruined City, all about? Well, in this wing we are following the adventures of Sir Finley Murgleton, who is apparently the only sentient Murloc in all of World of Warcraft. Well, perhaps with a few more exceptions. I don't recall any other Murlocs that are this dapper. You'll see when you enter the adventure. So, the Ruined City. For the first and second wings, we've had some very known locations in the World of Warcraft universe. The Ruined City is not among those, I'm afraid. We are looking at the world map. We are in the Stranglethorn jungle, which is at the very bottom of the Eastern Kingdoms continent. It's a jungle-y area, and we have no idea where this Ruined City actually is, because there's no area called the Ruined City. It might just have not been discovered yet. We don't know. What we do know about Stranglethorn Vale is that the area is a dense jungle filled with mostly troll ruins. There are plenty of troll tribes still living in the area. But the Ruined City we are looking at is overrun by Naga, which would place it somewhere near a body of water. No clue where it will be exactly. Lady Nazjar, which is apparently the leader of the Naga in the Ruined City, is a former Naga warlord, war lady. She leads an army from the sunken city of Fashir. She's also reported dead because she is a dungeon boss in World of Warcraft and has done some nasty things to Neptulon, the Waterlord. I'm not sure how she came to be the leader of the tribe here in the Ruined City, but the world may never know. The Ruined City consists of 3 more boss fights, the first being Lord Slitherspear and Nasty Big Naga. Giant Finn is the second boss, which is a big Murloc with some amusing interactions with Sir Finley Murgleton. And the third is Lady Nazjar herself. So let's take a look at the fights themselves. On normal mode, we have Lord Slitherspear, who has the hero power to summon a 1/1 hungry Naga for 0 mana, which he will automatically do at the start of his turn. Now every time he uses this ability, the Naga will grow stronger and stronger and stronger, eventually becoming 2/1, 3/1, 4/1, 5/1 minions. They will always retain their 1 health, but their attack might rise through the roof. So what are you supposed to do about this? Well, there is also a minion on his side of the board, which is Sir Finley in the Cauldron. Sir Finley has been trapped and is threatened to be cooked by Lord Slitherspear. He is a 0/5 minion with Taunt, so you will have to get rid of it to defeat Lord Slitherspear. So when you destroy this cauldron, Lord Slitherspear's hero power will change to be Enraged. He now will use this hero power at the start of every turn again, but now it costs 2 mana and gives him 2 attack this turn. Also, as soon as you free Sir Finley from the cauldron, he becomes a card in your hand and you can use him to change your hero power and to attack. So in Lord Slitherspear's deck, you will also find a couple of new minions. The first being the Slithering Archer, a 2/2 minion for 2 mana that deals 1 damage to a target. And also a 5 mana 3/6 with Taunt. Also, some noteworthy cards in his deck are Water Elementals and Cavalry Raiders, so you may want to bring some answers to some big minions. The next encounter is Giant Finn. Giant Finn is a big Murloc and obviously brings a Murloc deck, and the main problem with a Murloc deck is usually that it runs out of steam, being cards, really fast. So to combat that, he has a hero power which costs 0 mana and is used at the start of every turn, which draws him cards until he has as much as you. Now he uses the usual assortment of Murlocs like the new Murloc Tiny Fin, Murloc Tightcallers, which are especially dangerous because he can spam a lot of Murlocs in one turn, and also of course an old Markai, which is probably the most dangerous card in the deck. He also runs a unique card called Nya, which summons 3 Murlocs that died this game. Also, he runs the new card Anything Can Happen, which summons 7 Murlocs that died this game. Might be dangerous, so you may want to set up some taunts for the big turn 10. The last encounter is Lady Nazjar, who is quite a unique encounter. Her hero power is Pearl of the Tides, which triggers at the end of her turn, and will replace all minions on the battlefield with minions that cost 1 mana more. Which means that those minions will be healed entirely and replaced with minions that are probably a bit better. To help synergize with this hero power, she runs a couple cards like Murloc Tidehunter, Feral Spirit, and a couple of 0 mana minions like Murloc Tiny Fin, which makes it rather explosive, runs a lot of minions on the board at once, which may be hard to deal with. Some other cards in the deck are South Sea Deckhand, which is kind of puzzling because she doesn't run any weapons. Keeper of Uldaman, that might be something to keep track of. And also some North Sea Krakens, which may catch you by surprise and will, of course, at the end of her turn, turn into either an 8/8 Sea Giant or a 12/12 Deathwing. There are also a couple of class challenges in this adventure. There's a Hunter class challenge against Lord Slitherspear, which gives you a deck full of Lock and Load and a couple of spells like Explorer's Hat. Some interesting interactions there, and also the usual assortment of beasts, accompanied with Ram Wrangler and the new Desert Cow. It's a nice deck, nothing too special about it. You may want to use Sir Finley to change to a different hero power, or you may not want to play him at all because the Hunter hero power might be useful in finishing Lord Slitherspear off. The Shaman class challenge is up against Giant Finn and will surprisingly not run a Murloc deck against a Murloc deck, but does run a couple of Overload synergy cards like Lava Shock, Tunnel Trog, and also runs the assortment of Battlecry minions like Bran Bronzebeard and Rumbling Elemental, who synergize a lot with this. There's again a couple of cute combos, and it's overall a nice challenge. The third class challenge is a Priest deck who is up against Lady Nazjar. The Priest deck consists of a couple of new cards like Museum Curator from the next wing, the new card Entomb, which is actually not all that useful in this specific challenge, and has a couple of cheat minions like Murloc Tiny Fin or Target Dummy, quite a few minions that draw cards but have a comparatively small body for their mana cost, which will of course change at the end of your opponent's turn, and a couple of minions that spawn other minions, so I don't think you'll have too much trouble as long as you do keep board control against Lady Nazjar. The heroic encounters change things up a little bit. For example, Heroic Slitherspear will of course start with the usual plus 15 armor, and has it looks like the same hero power, but there is no longer any cauldron on the battlefield, so that means his hero power will never change during the encounter. Also, his hero power will now spawn 1/1 Nagas. Well, that sounds familiar, you would say, but for every usage of his hero power, the Naga will get +1/+1 instead of only +1 attack. So eventually you'll find yourself facing 6/6 Hungry Nagas, 7/7 Hungry Nagas. Stuff gets out of hand rather quickly. To top that off, he has some pretty nasty cards in his deck. The Slithering Archer is upgraded to not deal 1 damage to a target, but to deal 2 damage to all of your minions. And the Slithering Guard is upgraded from a 3/6 for 5 to a 5/7 for 5, which is a rather nasty beastie. Overall, a pretty challenging encounter, which gets out of hand rather quickly, but is a little bit reliant on how many Slithering Archers he manages to draw. The second heroic encounter is against Giant Finn, of course, and his hero power has changed a little bit. He does not draw extra cards depending on how many cards you have in hand, which may look like a weaker hero power, but you can no longer make his hero power worthless by just playing all of your cards on every turn. Also, he has the usual 15 extra armor and a big deck which has added the Murloc Tidehunters now. Quite a number of Murloc War Leaders who might make things really difficult for you. And his Murgle Narnia card is now upgraded to only cost 3 mana, and now summons 5 Murlocs that died this game, which makes quite a difference. To top that off, he now has a 50 card deck, so simply waiting for all the Murlocs to dissipate might take you a bit longer than you expected. The final heroic encounter is against Lady Nashjar, and her hero power has also changed a little bit. Pearl of the Tides now says at the end of your turn replace all minions with new ones, but yours cost 1 more. So that means that your minions will always retain the same mana cost, but hers will be replaced by 1 mana cost higher, and again and again and again. Also, our deck has received some upgrades. 1 Lightning Storm has been added, a Frostbolt. In general, some removal, 2 Death's Bites, which actually synergize with the minion that gains charge if you have a weapon. She has the Looming Presence card, which gives her cards and armor, and has quite a number of mirror images, which may very well be the most dangerous card in her deck, because this not only prevents you from killing her other minions, but also creates 2 minions on the board, which will continually be upgraded. So it's quite an interesting encounter. Alright, now to take a look at the cards you receive in your collection from this adventure. First of all, the Gorillabot A3, a 4 mana 3/4 mech unit with Battlecry. If you control another mech, discover a mech. This card does not look too exciting yet, especially if you consider it with the usual suspects of other 4 mana mechs like Piloted Shredder and Mechanical Yeti. Of course, this does give you the option to discover the mech you currently want in your hand, but its stats are kind of lowish, and mech decks are usually playing for the board control. So I don't see this card seeing much play. Maybe mech decks will play 1, maybe not. Next card is Huge Toad, which is a 2 mana 3/2 beast minion with Death Rattle, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. Now the first thought, of course, is, oh my gosh, power creep, this is so much better than Bloodfun Raptor. But if you sit and think about it, the Death Rattle will usually not be all that relevant. We can easily compare this card to a card like Flame Juggler, or a card like Knife Juggler, and the main advantage these cards have over the Huge Toad is that you have immediate control over where the random damage is going. With the Huge Toad, your opponent has that control, because he is usually the one to decide when the Huge Toad is going to die. So while this card is probably better than Bloodfun Raptor, it is still not all that good. As a reward from the second encounter, you get Murloc Tiny Fin, a 0 mana 1/1 Murloc, and that's all. This, of course, fits very well in a Hobgoblin deck, along with cards like Wisp and many other 1-attack cards, which might make the deck a little bit stronger. And of course, this is a mainstay in any Murloc deck, where it will make the deck just that little more explosive. It will empty your hand really quickly and overwhelm your opponent if they do not have a board clear at their hands immediately. The second card from the second encounter is Anything Can Happen, which is a 10 mana paladin spell. Summon 7 Murlocs that died this game. This card is most seen in one-turn kill decks, which combine the powers of 3 of the Murloc charge minions, 2 Bluegill warriors and 1 old Murkai, with 2 Murloc war leaders and possibly 2 Grimskill oracles to deal 30 damage in one hit. Of course, the prerequisite here is that all of these Murlocs have already died this game. There are a couple of big ifs, but this card seems better than people did expect. Although most of the time people have cut the Grimskill oracles and just ran with the 5 Murlocs here and then run Anything Can Happen twice to have the first one available as a board clear, and the second one will probably be lethal. Best thing about this card is probably that it gives Paladin some much needed burst damage. Next card is Naga Sea Witch, which is a 5 mana 5/5 minion, which says your cards cost 5 mana. That's a really cute card, and people have experimented with it a bit. I haven't seen it show up in any competitive decks thus far, but the potential is certainly here. We would most likely see this card in some kind of slowish druid deck, playing a 5 mana Sea Witch and then a 5 mana Ancient of Lore is quite excellent. We might also see it in a Warlock deck, where it will give you an outlet to play all your expensive giants and, for example, Lord Jaraxxus much earlier in the game than you normally would be able to. Or maybe even play a late game Mountain Giant, when you normally wouldn't be able to because of lack of cards in hand. Second card from the third encounter is Pit Snake, a 1 mana 2/1 beast minion. It's a rogue class card, and it says destroy any minion damaged by this minion. We've seen this before on cards like Patient Assassin, Emperor Cobra, or Myexna. These cards haven't proven to be very useful yet, although the main difference I should point out here is that Pit Snake, it has actually some decent stats for a 1 mana minion, while all of these other cards are rather unspectacular on their own. There is some potential, but it's just a little too vulnerable in most cases. Next card, as a reward for defeating every boss, is Jungle Moonkin, a 4 mana 4/4 beast minion, a druid class card, and it says both players have spell damage +2. And of course you can already think of combinations in which this card is absolutely amazing. Imagine swiping your opponent's board with this Jungle Moonkin. You deal 6 damage to one minion and 3 damage to all the others. That's almost flame striking your opponent for just 4 mana. The downside to this card is also very real, because if your opponent has a Consecration in response, not only does it deal 4 damage to the Jungle Moonkin, but also to every other minion you have. Or perhaps a priest will cast Holy Smite on the Jungle Moonkin, and he gets rid of your 4 mana minion for just 1 mana. And I dread to think of what would happen if a Warlock got his hands on an Implosion. All in all, a very risky card, but it might find a home in some niche decks. The final card, as a reward for every boss in this wing, is Sir Finley Murlton himself, a 1 mana 1/3 legendary Murloc. With Battlecry, discover a new basic hero power. So this will select 3 basic hero powers which are not yours, and let you select a new one immediately. You can use your old hero power before playing Sir Finley and then use your new hero power immediately. It has some nice synergies, but most decks looking for an effect like Sir Finley Murlton's are some decks that are not really interested in casting their own hero power, such as Grim Patron Warrior, Mech Shaman, or any aggressive Shaman basically, or perhaps an aggressive druid deck. So some decks might be interested in this card, and it has seen some play, but you'll have to play a deck that is not very well suited for your class in the first place. Finally, we have the rewards for the class challenges, the first being Dart Trap, as a reward for the Hunter's Challenge, which is a 2-mana secret. When an opposing hero power is used, deal 5 damage to a random enemy. So this is an odd little trap. It makes it a lot harder to play around all the different Hunter secrets. The best way to play around this is obviously to not use your hero power at all, but that's quite a powerful effect. The other way to play around this is to just play a lot of minions, which, of course, you can easily punish by playing Unleash the Hounds. So that sounds pretty nice, but if you think about it a little, all Hunter traps, for now, have been quite powerful effects like Freezing Trap, Bear Trap, Snake Trap. And Dart Trap does not really fit in this set of traps, because it's just so unpredictable. The card for the Shaman class challenge is Everything is Awesome. It's a 7-mana spell that says give your minions +2/+2 and costs 1 mana less for every Murloc you control. So that is obviously a great fit for any deck, including Murloc Tiny Fin or Murloc Tidehunter, because these minions, well, Tiny Fin essentially makes your Everything 1 mana cheaper, and Murloc Tidehunter gives you 2 minions on the board which get buffed and cost you nothing. So that's kind of amazing. Do keep in mind that Shamans already have Bloodlust as a card, and this card has the same problem as Bloodlust has, in that it only works if you already have some minions out on the board, and doesn't work all that well when you're playing from behind. And finally, as a reward for the Priest class challenge, we have Entomb, which is a 6-mana priest spell. Choose an enemy minion and shuffle it into your deck. So this card might remind you of a card called Recycle, which was a druid card from Goblins vs. Gnomes, which shuffled an enemy minion into your opponent's deck. So you might say this is strictly better, but this is a priest card, and Recycle is obviously a druid card. And priests already have a number of efficient cards to deal with enemy minions, such as Shadow or Death or Mind Control. But Entomb does provide a priest with a means below 10 mana to deal with some really annoying minions like Sylvanas Windrunner, and might be a viable solution to control matchups which the priest might otherwise have some trouble with. So with all the cards reviewed, let's take a look at the set as a whole. Is it worth it? As usual, let's take a look at 4 of the different motivations for which you might be interested in buying this adventure. If you want it just for the interesting encounters and the storyline, the Slither Spear fight is quite an interesting one because it's phased, though it is entirely different on Heroic, which is actually a little disappointing. I've seen some data mined cards with a 0-10 cauldron and a special drink that destroys all hungry Naga. I would have liked something like that, especially in the Heroic mode, because it's just not that interesting. The Lady Nastjar fight is actually a lot of fun, and we might see a Tavern Brawl in the future which has a similar mechanic. So we might see it again, and otherwise, well, there's still the Lady Nastjar fight, of course. The Giant Fin is perhaps the hardest normal boss I've encountered so far. If you are not really that prepared, you can really get overwhelmed if your deck does not include some efficient and early board clears. Still, all the normal encounters are very easily beaten, even with suboptimal decks, which I intend to prove with my autocomplete decks. You can watch those videos on my channel, of course. So if you enjoy the challenge of Heroic mode, do keep in mind that the rewards for beating Heroic mode are only attained if you buy the complete package. So if you buy all 4 wings and beat all Heroic challenges, you'll get the card back. That's all. Now for the specific encounters, a Slither Spear seemed to be very dependent on the totally unfair cards in his deck. It was a nice challenge, but as long as he doesn't draw his 2-mana minion which deals 2 damage to all of yours, he's actually not that hard. and I almost beat him with an aggressive deck because he simply didn't draw those cards. The Giant Fin encounter is a nice example of how an aggressive, rushy boss can work in heroic mode. Especially with the increased deck, I was kind of impressed, and actually a nice little challenge. The Nasjar encounter is really interesting in principle, but crumbles really easily as long as you maintain board control. So if she has a little bit of a weak start, your minions will get healed at the end of her turn every time, and you can probably capitalize on that by just keeping her board empty and not giving her any chance whatsoever. Your mileage, of course, may vary. Difficulty is very subjective, but I found these heroic mode challenges just a tad easy. So if you're looking for gimmicky cards to use in casual or brawl mode, or perhaps even in ranked, I won't stop you. Many of these cards are just not really that inspiring. There's a couple of beasts, there's a mech, they're just not good enough to be played in constructed, and they're not interesting enough to really make a casual deck around. A couple of worthwhile exceptions here are mostly Murlocs or Murloc related cards, like Every Fin is Awesome and Murloc Tiny Fin. Also there's the Spell Power Druid card, which might prove to be very interesting, but otherwise I'm not that impressed by the creativity in this wing. If you're looking for constructed cards, though, you might be looking for some other cards, such as the card Entomb, which is proving to be actually really valuable to most priest decks. Anything Can Happen is proving to be not just a gimmick card, but is actually a valid finisher for paladin decks. And the other Murlocs can also be sort of viable, but as usual, Murloc decks have the big disadvantage of really crumbling after the first few board wipes, and just not being very consistent overall. And finally, Sir Finley Murgleton is proving to be a valuable addition to most aggressive shaman decks, and perhaps some other decks that lack synergy with their hero power, such as an aggressive druid deck, as I mentioned, and perhaps some other decks in the future will also be able to make good use of this little Murloc. The fate of the other cards in the set are as of yet unknown and have yet to prove themselves to be constructed worthy. So overall, for constructed, this set is not as exciting as the first wing, or even the second wing, which has surprised me as to the amount of cards from the second wing that have proven to be viable, even though they are all from different classes. So in conclusion, this wing looks a little bit weaker, actually looks a lot weaker than the second wing in retrospect, because the second wing was actually a little bit stronger than I expected it to be. Keep in mind that the constructed viability of all these cards are relatively unsure, so if you're looking for that, you may want to hold off for a while, and that's my verdict. Unless you really want to play with Murlocs, or you really want that splashy finisher for your paladin deck, or you just can't wait to get your hands on the heroic challenges, you can do without this wing. Really. Of course, this might change depending on the cards in the final wing. It's not like all these cards are bad cards. It's just that their addition does not make that much of a difference. So if the fourth wing is amazing, you could certainly buy this. I wouldn't feel ripped off if I bought this, but I would definitely focus on Naxxramas and Blackrock Mountain before buying the third wing of the League of Explorers. Alright, that's it for the third wing. Thank you very much for watching, hope this has been of some use for you, and I will see you soon for the fourth and final wing.